Okay, we're pretty close to 10:30. We will call to order the 147th public meeting of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, once again at the Boston Convention Center. First item on our agenda is the approval of minutes. Commissioner McHugh.
The minutes to be approved, Mr. Chairman, are in the packet of materials in the book, and I'd move that they be accepted as they appear there with the usual reservation of our power to change mechanical and typographical errors.
Second.
Any questions, discussion? I just had one on legal division at 220. I thought I remembered that we decided not to release the 20%. Or the 20, no, I'm sorry. No, it was the 20,000 that we decided not to release.
It was 20% of the, that was my recollection, it's 20% of that amount
Yeah,
of the 4%.
that we decided to hold back.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was thinking of the 20,000 in the other fund that we decided. Okay, got it. Right, okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. We then go to Director Day, I believe, for an administrative update.
Good morning, Chairman Crosby and fellow commissioners.
Good morning. Morning.
What I'd really like to do for an administrative update is just have an announcement, and I'm very happy about this announcement that I've appointed Dr. Alexandra Lightbaum, the acting director of racing. And I wanted to spend just a couple minutes. What that means, of course, is as interim director of licensing, Dr. Lightbaum is responsible for coordinating the registration of the state's horse racing industry and implementing chapters 128 and 128C. She has over 26 years of experience in horse racing, with 23 of those years in regulatory position. Dr. Lightbaum was most recently held the position of Chief Veterinarian and Operations Manager for the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. In this role, she was responsible for a series of regulatory reforms put in place by the Gaming Commission. Prior to this role, for 3 years, she was acting director of racing and chief veterinarian for the Massachusetts Racing Commission and for the Massachusetts Department of Professional Licensure. This included being responsible for field operations at the state racetracks, overseeing auditors, licensing, and drug testing laboratory, test barn, and stewards and judges. Dr. Lightbaum began her career with the Massachusetts Racing Commission as chief veterinarian, overseeing health and welfare of the state's racing animals. And Dr. Lightbaum's first job at a racetrack, might be not a surprise, was in Santa Fe, New Mexico as a veterinary assistant. After completing her Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree, she worked for private practice in Suffolk Downs in East Boston and for about a year in Rockingham Park in Salem, New Hampshire. She earned her Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from Tufts University, Veterinary Medicine in North Grafton, Massachusetts, and she earned a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Colorado State University. So we want to spend just a minute to acknowledge that appointment, and the Commission will hear from Dr. Lightbaum and her staff a little bit later on today. The other thing I want to note, just for information purposes, is regarding our efforts to locate a temporary Springfield office. We have identified a temporary space for a Commission office in Springfield with UMass in the Tower Square area. This seems a reasonable agreement, or a regional arrangement, a reasonable, I'll see if I can get that out.
It's reasonable. We understand that.
Anyway, it's okay. This seems a reasonable arrangement, as we already have relationships with UMass through the research project. The space also has conference room area space, and we will be identifying our long-term needs as we move forward.
And it's right near the site, right? It's right near the
Correct.
casino site.
It is. It's not. It's across the street from MGM and a couple blocks away, I believe, from the casino site.
Great. And Commissioner Stebbins will be working from there from time to time.
Yes, he will be. Oh, well, that's my understanding. That's what he will be doing, yes. And from this perspective, what I'd like to do is, because we may have lots of questions and a little bit longer discussion, is move right into our budget discussion, if I could.
That is item 3C.
Correct. I know you've had the opportunity to take a look at the budget and also the numerous spreadsheets that were attached by our CFAO. But I'd like to make just a few remarks about the budget as we move forward, and then I'll turn it over to CFO Lennon. As we begin to review these budget recommendations, I'd like to start with our conclusion, really, which is a budget and operations proposal that results in a recommendation to reduce this licensee assessment by $449,000 for fiscal 15. I'd like to note a few points regarding operations through the remaining months of this fiscal year that put the budget into perspective, and then I'll turn it over to Derek. We anticipate that the Penn National Gaming will be opening the slot parlor in June. In order to carry out and be prepared to regulate the operation, we have to complete a number of tasks. And I'll guarantee I won't go through that long list. You'll find the list laid out in the memorandum as well. But the Gaming Act requires state police at our gaming facilities and the commission to have a 24-hour presence. To fulfill this requirement, MSP and our Investigations Bureau are selecting and training troopers and gaming agents to regulate and enforce law at the facility. That same staff, as we get done training them and getting them ready to regulate at the facility, will be conducting the pre-opening inspection, which is a final review to confirm that count rooms, counting equipment, cash areas, emergency generator system, games, process, and procedures are ready for the opening. MSP, as well, MSP, local law enforcement agency, and the Commission are also working to finalize an agreement of cooperation to support that process. And we are also, under the Gaming Act, required to make arrangements and enter into agreement with the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission, which we are very close to completing that process. And I might note as we move forward here that ABCC has been tremendously helpful to us as we've been looking at our regulations and working out an agreement with them to provide alcoholic beverage services at the facilities. While we are working with Penn, we're also working with Penn to license or register about 438 additional employees over the remaining period. We've seen significant response in addition to the vendors. We have a number of vendors submit for licensing, and of course, ultimately, it's up to Penn who they actually contract with to deliver the services. At the same time, our staff is continuing to finish development of our license management system, and we've added 2 licensing employees to help address this workload. We are also implementing our self-exclusion program with procedures, forms, and training. In addition, we are developing a play management system project and GameSense, Responsible Gaming Information Center on site. To support the many research and responsible gaming initiatives, we were recommending to add a program manager to help our director go through that process. GTEC, which has been selected by the Commission to provide our central management system to electronically monitor the slots, and we are at this point in the process of developing a specific project plan in cooperation with Penn and GTEC. Of course, our emphasis in this is, of course, to establish the Commission's ability to monitor ongoing or daily operations. But at the same time, we want to make sure as we implement this program that it does not interrupt Penn's operation or slow their planned opening in any way. And finally, but our racing division as well is completing their seasonal hires and preparing to issue approximately 650 licenses from the period of about mid-March through April 30th. And as I commented, on page 4, you'll find a complete list of the tasks that we anticipate prior to the opening of the slot parlor. Through the end of fiscal year, we plan to add 22 employees. These positions are essential for being ready to begin to regulate the slots parlor, and in fact, 12 are based particularly at the slot parlor. In addition, we are anticipating between 10 to 12 troopers to provide 24-hour law enforcement presence at the slot parlor. And on page 8, we've also included a specific table that describes each position and what they will be, and the total number of positions on site. Now what I'd like to do is I've talked a little bit about our tasks and our staffing. I'd like to turn this presentation over to CFO Lennon.
Before we do that, I have a question. You mentioned the project plan for the CMS. What is the timeline for that, and are we constrained by the opening of the slots parlor to have that implemented?
The plan in that process is first we requested and have received an initial proposal or proposed plan from GTEC. Our staff is getting together with Penn staff, technical staff next week to actually develop a specific project plan that will cover when that will start and finish of the project and everything in between. The process, though, is not planned to begin before, to have an implementation date before the slot parlor actually opens. We anticipate that it will be really a phased-in process that will work for Penn and will work for us to be able to bring the system up. But it will not be before the fiscal year, and it will not interfere in their operations.
So when is the plan, when do we get the plan? When do you get the plan?
Well, I anticipate I'll get it shortly after I return after a few days off, but it should begin to be, it should be pretty much available toward the end of next week.
Okay.
Did you want to add something?
We have a meeting on Monday to join the two plans together, hopefully. The teams are meeting for the first time. The contract should be executed, and we should be able to see the critical path. But we've already, I think, made the decision. We're not going to try to open or integrate the CMS prior to opening. We'll do a phased implementation post-opening day. That's I think that mitigates the risk of impacting their opening. There really isn't enough time now. The original plan was January 1st. So I think, I just want to put it on the table. Going forward, we'll work with Penn, but it'll be a post-opening implementation.
And has Penn agreed to that?
We let them know at the meeting this week that was the way it was going to go. I think they were relieved that we weren't going to try to go. They have a pretty solid plan, and we're late to the game. So.
Right.
But in answer to Commissioner Zuniga's question, it sounds like we should probably, by our next meeting, see the plan that you all are.
I think you can see a straw man of the miles. Yes, I think we can have something. When I do the gaming lab, I think Derek and I can come back and show you at least a timeline and how we see it going. Yeah.
We should have
We didn't introduce the last speaker, that's CIO John Glennon, for those
sorry.
watching at home.
we should have a proposed plan by tomorrow, because our meeting is Monday at 1 o'clock. So we should have whatever GTEC's going to propose to us by tomorrow. That was what they had mentioned to us, if we don't have it by tomorrow.
Yeah, and my question was more
That's a
about
problem.
what, whatever is the product of those
yes,
proposals and meetings. I understand that there's, two sides to the
Yes.
implementation, and they need to work it out, and, we're sort of in the middle watching, but would like to understand that.
Absolutely.
In the end, we're having the meeting next week. The idea of how soon the parties can come together to get a plan so it's back before the commission. 4/2 sounds like a date that's possible, but on the other hand, we haven't sat down and started to debate the process at this point.
Okay.
Any other questions for me?
No?
Derek?
Thank you, Mr. Day. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners.
Good morning.
I'm going to take this opportunity to let you know I'm going to read from my prepared notes so that I don't miss any key points. If I'm looking down and you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me.
Be sure to speak into the mic, Derek.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm here today to provide you with our second quarterly update. I know it's a little late, seeing that we're in March. That'll make our third quarterly update much easier. It will only be about a month afterwards. And this quarterly update was built to support the operations plan that the Executive Director Day talked about. So whatever is in this plan, whatever's laid out as far as functions, it is funded in the budget. Included in your package is a memorandum and 5 appendices. Appendix A is the standard monthly report that is on our website. It's updated every month. The only difference with this one is you have what our proposed changes are for the quarter in our budget, and that's the column named proposed changes, proposed adjustments. You also, those adjustments are explained in the memorandum as well as listed out in detail in Appendix C and D. One, they're the same information. Appendix C lays it out by division. Appendix D lays it out by spending category to tie along with Appendix A. Appendix B is an update to the balances remaining for each applicant, as well as the backup documentation for some of the revenue adjustments that I'm being proposed in this memorandum. And Appendix E is just a summary level report of each division's budgets and their spending tracked against those budgets as they were loaded into the Commonwealth's accounting system, and is pretty much real-time data. The top-level summary of this report is we're recommending decreasing the gaming control fund anticipated spending by $1.38 million, reducing revenue projections by $945.8 thousand, and the results would, as Director Day pointed out, ultimately reduce our proposed assessment by $449,000. It would reduce it from $20.78 million down to $20.33 million. And as I was reviewing Appendix A this morning, I noticed that under the revenue adjustments section, I put the 449 in the wrong column, so I'll have to adjust that if you vote to approve these adjustments on the packet. So following along with the memorandum, on page 2, the majority of revenue reductions come from licensing fees. Originally, we had projected $1.259 million in annual licensing revenues. I've had to reduce that down to $484,000. The majority of that is we are doing, the main reason for that is we're doing, well, it's twofold. One, we over-projected how many licenses we'd be processing this year, and the second is we've done a lot more of it in-house. So the costs have greatly reduced, so we don't have to bill back as much. For the gaming primary vendors, we're reducing from $900,000 down to $300,000. The main reason for that is we had projected cost to be about $60,000 per applicant. It's running around $20,000 right now. Under gaming vendor secondary projections, we've only received about half as many as we initially thought, so we're revising that down by $50,000. And under the key gaming employees, once again, it was a bad estimate on our part. We thought we were going to have about double as many applicants as we had. Plus, we were expecting the cost to be around $5,000. I think they're running about $2,500 right now.
Great.
So, in addition to the decreases in licensing revenues, we have some refunds that we have to make for the Region A applicants, both Mohegan, Sun, and Wynn. We collected more than the actual reviews costed, so we're going to refund, and that's shown on Appendix B. We're refunding, I think it's $154,000 for one and $158,000 for the other. And then the final adjustment to our revenues, we had initially anticipated refunding all of the Phase 1 applicant licensees where we had balances and applicants, not licensees, applicants. 3 of those applicants have actually applied for Region C, so those funds were taken out of being a refund, moved into the Region C fund line, and you'll see the corresponding revenue adjustments there. So in total, that brings our revenue projections down by $945,000. If you'd like any further details on that right now, I can answer them.
Yeah, actually, on the first point you made on the 449 that's in the wrong column.
Yes.
Which, can you just help me understand that?
Yes, so I actually put the decrease on that piece to,
See
it's
first
actually the
page?
wrong row. So I put it under the transfer of licensing, the 17.5 million. It
It's
should
really
be
in the
one row
assessment.
up. So I don't want this to reflect that we're paying back less to the mitigation fund. I wanted to be sure that we're reducing the assessment, not the mitigation fund.
So it should go one row down.
Yes.
Yep. Great.
I had a question about, good morning, by the way.
Good
And I
morning.
just wanted to compliment you on preparing a very user-friendly budget format.
Thank you.
Other budgets are much more difficult to read, and this format is one that works well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Secondly, your projections for anticipated number of applicants, you feel like that's been done in consultation with the licensee, so those numbers should be somewhat accurate?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Those are updated.
Those are
You
updated
know,
numbers, they're what
we-
we're actually receiving, what we anticipate to receive from Penn as they've reported to us, as well as what we've processed so far for MGM and Wynn.
Okay, thank you.
So now I'll move over to the spending side, which is on the bottom of page 2 of the memorandum and goes through page 4. We're recommending decreasing spending by 1.3 million. These changes are laid out in detail in appendices C and D. But I'll just walk through the high level. Under the employee compensation line, we're decreasing by 17.5 thousand. That's a combination of delays in hires, as well as, so there's some ups and some downs you'll see in the appendices. And there were some raises given out for non-managers where it was across the board 3% raise. So we pulled it out of the HR line, moved it into each division's line. This is just realigning in the budget. Under the intern line, which is the CC object class, we've reduced by 40.9 thousand. And the reason for that is we've pushed off a lot of our intern hiring into FY16. The DD line is decreased based on a percentage base of the ANC, so that goes down by 5,000. Under administrative expenses, this is the only line that actually is showing an increase, but if you look into the budget documents by division, these are net zero decreases, net zero offsets. So I made a mistake. I budgeted our lease cars under the LL object class. When the Office of Vehicle Management gave me the actual lease bill, it comes under a different object class, so I had to move it from the L up into the E. And then our responsible gaming and research office moved money out of the cohort study where they had extra money anticipated and moved it up to a conference to attend. Under consultant services, we're decreasing by 664.5 thousand. The big changes there are the 313,000 that I referenced earlier that we have to refund out to Wynn and Mohegan. Initially, I thought it was going to be paid to consultants. With the refund, I'm not going to have that corresponding cost. And then the other piece was the decrease in licensing fees. We're not doing most of the Region A, most of the gaming primary we had anticipated we'd bill back. We're not going to bill those back, so we've got corresponding offsets there. The L I just discussed, it's a corresponding with the E. The P is the grants is also a net zero that had to do with responsible gaming, where we moved money out of the cohort study back up to the E for conferences. And then the other big decrease in cost we have is under the IT object class. We're reducing it by 650,000. If you look at the sheet, the detail sheets, it's a lot of net zero adjustments for our LMS licensing system, where we moved money out of phase 2 into phase 1 to make sure phase 1 functions properly. The public will have a good user experience with it. Our back office will have a better user experience with it, which I think was a judicial move, and thank you for approving that earlier in the year. But the large decrease has to do with the CMS system. The price came in lower than we were anticipating, and we're implementing it about 2.5 months later, so we're saving those 2.5 months worth of costs. That's driving our budget down by about 750,000, but we had to add 100,000 back to the IT budget so that they can use one of the independent test labs to help test the floor and have it open, because GTEC has told us they will not be able to have the system installed by Penn's opening, which means we'll have to go around and have the gaming agents seal each device and make sure that the right piece of software is on each machine. That summarizes all of the spending reductions. So spending reductions of 1.38 million. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back to my earlier notes. Spending reductions of 1.38 million, revenue reductions of 945,000, brings me to my recommendation of decrease of $449,000 for an assessment. Do we have any, I will get into the horse racing as well as what's left for the assessment, but do you have any questions on the spending reductions right now?
I do a couple,
Okay.
and you know, same comment that it's really great to be able to follow by division and you know, with the even with the cost, with the object class reclassification, it's very user-friendly. But you mentioned the consultants decrease, which is
Yes.
also a positive, overall positive in my view. We're also spending, however, money on reviewing a lot of the ongoing submissions like the SFEIR, et cetera. Do all of those costs now come under the oversight rubric?
Yes,
In
they
other
do.
words-
And so those, both the base cost for services of OPM as well as a set-aside has been built into each one of those budgets for expert services. So that's
Right.
all coming under the OPM right now, and we have about $460,000 set aside for both Region A and Region B monitoring through the end of the year.
Right.
And we think those numbers
Are
have a
solid.
little bit extra in there in case something comes up. So we tried to budget on the
Conservative side?
conservative side.
Excellent, excellent. I also noticed there is a bit of a decrease on legal outside counsel. Is that also just relative to cash flow, or?
That was a net zero. So what we did was we moved it out of the outside counsel, basically defending lawsuits, and moved it into the reg review,
Okay,
because our lawsuit defense is a little lower than what we projected. I had to keep what our insurance policy requires us to keep in for that contingency, but
Okay.
we had budgeted a little higher. We
Okay.
dropped that estimate down a little bit,
That's
not
great.
drastically.
yep. Great.
So we've got a lot of detail behind the Game and Control Fund. In your packet, you also have all of our other appropriations of spending under Appendix A. And as you'll see, there aren't many adjustments we can reflect right now, and the main reason for that is the racing division takes up the rest of these appropriations. And while the majority, there's a lot of uncertainty in the racing industry, especially the thoroughbred side of the house. So what we've tried to do is focus our attention on keeping track of actuals and revenue when it comes to the harness horse track. We've met extensively with the racing division on this. Revenues will come in to match what our budgets anticipated for that side of the house. But just for the commission's perspective, what we did do is take a look at what would happen under two different scenarios with the thoroughbred side of the house. One, if live racing didn't occur, and the second is if both live racing and simulcasting were shut down at Suffolk. So under the first scenario, where simulcasting continues for the last 3 months of the fiscal year and only live racing is not happening in the Commonwealth, we would lose $17,000 in revenue to our oversight fund, but we'd also not have to spend $200,000 in operational costs. So it'd almost be a net increase to our balance sheet. In the other instance, if live racing and simulcasting was shut down, we would lose $352,000 to our balance sheet, and we would only not have to spend $200,000, which would actually have a negative impact, which would cause our roll forward into the future year to be much less than what was projected at the beginning of this process. So there's nothing we can really do other than sit back and watch, but I just wanted to give the commission an update and maybe put some thought into what we might have to do for FY16 if either of these scenarios happen.
What were those numbers again on the second scenario? It was,
352.6 thousand is what we lose for just 3 months of
Yes.
revenue. So, you're talking about a year, you're really extrapolating that out. And 200,000 in spending, so it'd be a negative 150 on our balance sheet we'd lose.
thank you.
All things considered, just as you conclude on that note, there's so much in a state of flux that we just have to see what the legislature decides to
Yeah.
do, or what the thoroughbreds can, what happens in that
Correct.
space.
Correct. Pages 8 and 9 of the memorandum deal with assessment and what we have billed to date. On that chart, I've taken the liberty to reduce the assessment in anticipation that you'd approve decreasing the assessment by $449,000, decrease it down to $20.33 million. We've collected $8.94 million, which means we'd still need to bill $11.38. And while we've had many internal discussions among staff about what the definition of approved gaming positions would be so that we can do the proper assessment based on each licensee's proportional share, the only time that we can really think of that the commission has officially approved gaming positions was when the licenses were awarded. And the only additional opportunity we have, unless we change our process around, would be when an operation certificate is approved. So for the purposes of billing for assessment, proportional shares of gaming positions, I'm recommending that we keep consistent the gaming positions reported by HLT in Section 2.3 of the finance presentations, which were approved by the commission until an operation certificate is approved, and those are reflected in that chart on page 8 and 9. Based on that chart, I would ask the commission to approve us to bill licensees for the balance of their assessment as reported in the column balance remaining. This brings me to the end of my presentation. I'd like to welcome.
I was
any-
actually going to make a point on that. Not only will you get the approval eventually, but the real encouragement to get ahead of these billings, in my view, we also need to be concerned or watchful of those collections overall.
Correct.
And I know it's about refining a little bit our internal processes, but that's important. It's important to me, and it's important to everybody.
On the licenses piece?
Yes.
Correct.
Which,
Well, all collections.
assessments?
All collections.
All collections.
All collections. But there's a component on the licensing piece that I know you're at work at.
Correct.
You're working on. We have to be able to determine the cost and apportion it and account for it and bill it. And because now we're getting into so many more transactions with key vendors and key employees, et cetera, that has a real logistics challenge. But I know you're working hard at it, and encourage you to do that.
Thank you, and we'll definitely tap into you for your experience on that. But it is going to be a very coordinated effort, as you stated. Until we can get phase 2 of the licensing system built, a lot of those hours are being kept in the licensing division until they process the application, then IAB as they actually review it, and then we have to sit down and get the billing, what we've billed to date by license. So you're correct. That is an area that we have to get done by May 30th, so we can get that revenue in by June 30th and send out the bill.
Right. Right.
Are there any further questions,
guess not.
comments?
No, thank you.
Then in that case, if the commission has no further questions, I'd like to recommend that the commission approve the request in the conclusion section of the memorandum. I've tried to write it out so that it's easy to make a motion.
Commissioner Zuniga, you want to?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And overall, great work. A lot of detail goes into putting all these financials periodically, which is also something in our website, which is also something that we're committed to do. So I'm really happy with the result overall as well, showing that we have a conservative approach, and we, as the year concludes, we are in a position to return money or decrease the assessment overall, which I think it's much better than the alternative, having to make assessments last minute or towards the end of the year.
And on that note, I just want to say the directors at the MGC, having their own budgets and managing it has been very good. They've been held very accountable to it, as you can see. Most of the changes are net zero or actually driving costs down. We've just got a great team here, great group of directors. Very easy to work with.
Absolutely, and it's all made possible because of the way your department has set up by department these budgets and track them using all the technology that we have available to us. So this is very,
Yes.
it speaks well to your department as well.
Agnes, Joanne, Maria, Jay, they're all working very hard.
They
so-
are, they all are. So I would move that the commission approve the proposed adjustments for the second quarter as shown in Appendix A to the balance of the fiscal year 15 budget, and approve the subsequent or corresponding reduction in the assessment on the licensees as presented in the packet here.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No, I'd just like to add my thanks for the transparency of the format that we have. It's easy for us to follow, and when we started down the path of putting these up and updating them rapidly on the website so that others could see what we were doing, this is the kind of easy-to-follow format that I had hoped for, and I think that all of us did. So I add my thanks to the others for executing on that.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
That brings us to item D, ABCC regulations with Deputy Counsel Grossman.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We have before you a draft of the ABCC regulations. It's appeared before you once before. It was sent out for informal comment, and in the interim, we've had a chance to discuss the draft with our licensees as well as with our colleagues at the ABCC. We have made a number of adjustments and changes that I'd like to go through right now. And at the end of the presentation, I'll ask that you consider moving this draft through to the formal promulgation process so that we can move towards a public hearing. The first area that I'd like to just point out is on the first page where we have defined the term complimentary or free of charge. That's important in the context of complimentary or free drinks, in really gaining an understanding of what we mean by complimentary or free. And here we say that something is complimentary or free if it's not paid for with money or other form of monetary-like consideration, to include such things as gift cards or rewards points. And that becomes important in the context of the service of alcoholic beverages within a casino, which in some respects is different from service elsewhere. It's important to note, though, we've made great efforts to ensure that the language in these regulations is consistent wherever possible with state law when it comes to the service of alcoholic beverages outside of the casino. And this was one area, though, where we felt like a definition would help clarify how the service would work inside the casinos. That works hand in hand with a provision that's a little further on down. It's on page, starts at the bottom of page 6 of the draft, the top of page 7, where we have a section entitled Distribution of Alcoholic Beverages Free of Charge. In there, we refined the provision where we talk about ensuring payment for beverages, and again, what it means for something to be free. And here we have a provision where we talk about provision of alcoholic beverages to a patron at no cost. And the important element here to note is that we say that if the beverages are paid for by a third party, then they're no longer free or complimentary. That covers a scenario in which you have a function of some sort, and that somebody has paid for the drinks, but the individual who is actually receiving the beverage has not paid for it. So that would be covered there. We also included a provision to require that any such transaction be documented so that our or the ABCC inspectors at the facility could ensure that these transactions were in fact actually paid for. We have a mirror provision in our internal control draft that governs documentation of transactions that are paid for with forms of consideration other than money, so that any time essentially an alcoholic beverage is purchased in the casino, whether for money or for other forms of non-monetary consideration, there will be documentation of the transaction so that we can ensure that there was some form of payment for the drink.
So the open bar at the wedding, we need the person who paid for that?
You wouldn't need the person, you would need a receipt showing that it was paid for. And that,
Todd, excuse me, it's in the statute that drinks can only be free within the gaming area, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
So that's a great place to really start the conversation, actually, is what the statute says. You start with under state law that you can't give away alcoholic beverages free of charge. The Gaming Act, Chapter 23K, Section 26, says that you can give away free drinks in a casino in the gaming area. That's actually, Section 26 says you can give away free drinks in the gaming area or anywhere in the gaming establishment. There's a provision in the Gaming Act, which is not codified in Chapter 23K, that limits the service of alcoholic beverages free of charge just to the gaming area. So there is little question that if a casino were to provide an alcoholic beverage to someone in the gaming area who's playing a game, playing a slot machine, et cetera, that is specifically allowed under state law. And given the unique nature of casinos, it was important that we refine our understanding of what it means to give away a free drink. And that's why it was important that we develop the definition of free or complimentary to recognize the rewards programs and other types of services that are offered by casinos. And that's what's all incorporated in here, and that's the primary difference between the draft you have before you today and the one that you saw a couple of weeks back. There are a couple of other adjustments that we made in here, but that was the big one, and certainly happy to discuss that further. This will, of course, go through a public comment period, so anybody who's interested in helping us to refine our understanding of what that means or suggest alternative approaches, we'll have an opportunity to do that.
So Todd, when it comes to the free gaming beverage question, essentially the regulation at this point says it's either it's free in the gaming area or it's paid for by rewards points, for lack of a better term, or a third party in essence.
I think that's a broad, fair description of it.
This is all very are you finished with your presentation, or are you going to go?
On the complimentary, there are just a few other minor details I would point
go
out.
ahead.
Actually, probably just one other thing. I would just add that we also beefed up the provisions dealing with the storage of the alcohol. We hadn't really been clear on that point, so we added in a few places, in fact, some that may not be in your draft, that I just asked that we be allowed to amend as well, requiring information be provided to us relative to where the licensees intend to store the alcoholic beverages when they're not when the service areas aren't open. But that was the only other point I wanted to make.
Okay, I had three points, one minor, but interesting, at least to me, and that is the bottle service provision.
Yes.
Says that if you get a bottle of wine, it has to be poured by somebody who's licensed. You can't just put the bottle on the table and
Well,
pour it yourself?
not the wine, and maybe we should clarify that point. That's intended for liquor.
Are alcoholic, is alcoholic beverages a defined term?
Is alcoholic beverages? I don't know if we define that.
Or maybe you ought to think about that.
Just, that's a good point, yeah.
You know, bottle of wine, you ought to,
Right,
the person may be busy and you'd be thirsty all night.
right. No, we can't have that. That's,
Okay, the second point, and I missed this the last time around, is the minimum insurance requirement, which I think is 250,000, 500,000, right?
Right.
That's on page 6. That strikes me as extraordinarily low. Where'd those numbers come from?
those were numbers, I believe that's actually higher than the present state law. Those were, I believe, recommended by the ABCC.
$250,000 for a death, for liability for a death is, well, let's see what comments we get. I really think that's not high enough, but let's see what happens. And 500,000 for an accident, which could be a multiple death, sadly, event. Thinking now about automobiles is, it strikes me, anyway, I've made my point. The third and final thing is, are the remaining points of disagreement between us and the ABCC, or is the ABCC in agreement with this?
I wouldn't necessarily, yeah, there is one area that we're still working through, and that is relative to acceptable forms of identification when it comes to demonstrating that someone is 21 years of age. And to understand where we're coming from and where they're coming from, I think you have to start by looking at the two statutes that govern acceptance of identification to prove age. Under, happen to have the ABCC law right here. The ABCC statute is, it's Chapter 138, Section 34B, where it talks about the forms of ID that a licensee, and that's a bar or restaurant, not the casino, may reasonably rely on for proof of a person's identity. And that if they do rely on that, their license essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, can't be revoked or suspended, and that they shall be presumed to have exercised due care in making service of beverage to someone who's under 21 if they rely on the forms of ID that are cited in the general Massachusetts statute, Section 34B. In this statute, those forms of ID are limited to, I believe, Massachusetts liquor ID cards, Massachusetts driver's licenses, any passport, or military IDs. And it's further refined when it comes to the due care provision, where it doesn't allow, as I understand it and I read it, a passport to be used to satisfy that burden. So that's the statute that the ABCC enforces, and that is applicable to all alcoholic beverage licensees in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Under the liquor, the alcoholic beverage provisions of Chapter 23K, that's governed by Section 26, and specifically 26 paragraph C when it comes to our regulations. And what the law says as it applies to casinos is that the Commission, in consultation with the ABCC, shall promulgate regulations on the forms of identification that may be presented to the gaming licensee to demonstrate proof that a person has attained the age of 21. the way we read that is that that's different from what Chapter 138 says. 138 is essentially a presumption establishment of a burden and a shifting of a presumption, whereas Section 26 under Chapter 23K talks about identifying acceptable forms of identification. And just to illustrate what we're actually talking about here, the only real difference between our list and the list under Chapter 138 is that we say that you can also accept out-of-state driver's licenses and out-of-state liquor IDs. And otherwise, the forms of acceptable ID are identical, I believe.
You mean today, if somebody from California goes into a bar and presents a California driver's license, the bartender can't accept that?
No, but if it turns out to be a fake, they can't rely on that to defend themselves.
I see.
Whereas in our case, it says you have to come up with a list of acceptable forms of ID. And if we don't include
I see.
out-of-state
I
IDs,
see.
then you'd run into the problem, in theory, that you just identified.
Right.
To resolve some of the issue, and this was part of our discussion with the ABCC, we've added language into our regulation that says that the casino should use scanners,
Right.
ID scanners,
Right.
which, as we're learning, would alleviate some of
Yeah.
that issue.
The newer scanners are very good at detecting false identification, forged identification.
So those homemade things that I've heard people might use won't work.
Those homemade licenses, you mean?
Right. Got it.
That's the big area that we're working through at the moment with the ABCC.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, I was also wondering about out of state, all those Yankee fans that go to Fenway Park. Must
Right. They shouldn't
Provide
drink
something.
anyway.
No, they should be watching the game, right?
Commissioner McHugh, we also have recently received, we forwarded our latest draft to ABC as well. We recently received their response, and so we anticipate having another meeting with them and
Great.
re-verifying what
Great.
their advice might be before we go to final.
Great.
While we're on this topic, I wanted to clarify one thing. There's been discussion in the press about the Treasurer's Office, which supervises ABCC. ABCC resides in the Treasurer's Office, needing more money for agents, for personnel for the ABCC, due in part to the need to regulate the casinos. We obviously have no opinion on whether or not the treasurer needs more personnel. That's up to them. But everybody should understand that we pay for the ABCC agents who will work in the casinos. And in fact, we have already worked out an arrangement to pay for an agent who will cover the casino in Plain Ridge. So there's the licensees, in effect, are paying for ABCC agents. There's no increased demand for money on the ABCC from the casinos. That should be clear.
Chairman Crosby, I think with that is probably a good time to also notes, because we also have an agreement and pay for the Attorney General's office, the state police, and the ABC, and eventually we'll be tying in the local authorities there as well.
Right. I mean, that's been an important point from the beginning. The legislature made sure that the opening of casinos puts no additional pressure on any of the critical regulatory state regulatory bodies. The commission through, or the licensees through the commission pays for increased personnel for all of these agencies, ABCC, State Police, and Attorney General, as you said.
yes.
Anything else on this topic,
Yeah,
Commissioner Stebbins?
I had a quick question on page 6. About 2/3 of the way down, you talk about alcoholic beverage tastings and notifying the IEB.
Right.
Is that term, also reference our state police, the ABCC. Why are we designating IEB under that circumstance?
Well, the IEB will be enforcing the liquor plan in the casino alongside the ABCC. As the chair was just mentioning and Mr. Day has discussed, the ABCC will have an agent or agents who will be assigned at times to work in the casinos, though it's not anticipated that they'll be there full-time. So our folks who will be there full-time will be required to enforce the alcoholic beverage rules a large amount of the time. So this was intended to ensure that if the casino is going to have a tasting, that they have one place that they know they can go and just make the notice, and that we'll make sure the appropriate entities know what's going on.
Okay.
Yes, and it should be, just for clarification, that the ABCC agent will actually be part of that task force under IEB as well.
Okay.
Can I ask a general clarification? The regulations talk about the jointly responsible person in many instances, jointly responsible to the licensee. Are those instances where the operator has licensing agreement or an operation agreement for restaurants and bars, for example, with a third party? Or is it different people?
No, that's exactly right. If they
Okay.
were to lease out a space to
Bobby Flay or
Yeah.
Doug Flutie or...
then the statute says that the commission can issue a gaming beverage license to the gaming licensee. It doesn't talk about issuing separate licenses or anything like that. So that's why everyone has to fall under the umbrella of the gaming beverage license. And we've set up that infrastructure to include entities like that.
Good.
Okay. We need a vote.
Yes, we do.
Who'd like to do this one? Commissioner Cameron?
Sure. I move that we approve CMR 205, Sections 13601 through 13608, having to deal with the distribution of alcoholic beverages at the gaming establishment.
And move it into the formal
Formal process.
The formal
hearing and
process,
approval
correct.
process. Second. Mr. Stebbins, second. Any further discussion?
This is just another example of great thoughtful work from our legal division and all of the intricacies of a couple of different statutes coming together, so thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. 2 weeks ago, I appeared before you and talked about
Introduce
I'm John Glennon, and I have the Chief Information Officer, and I have with me 3 guests today, and I'll read their profiles and then I'll give my report. Starting with Mr. James Maida. Mr. Maida is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Gaming Labs International, LLC, Lakewood, New Jersey. Mr. Maida began his career in gaming with the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement in Atlantic City in 1985. In 1987, he left the division to study law and begin an independent game testing and consulting business. Gaming Laboratories International was co-founded in 1989. The company has more than 850 people and 21 offices worldwide. GLI LLC consults and tests more than 42 state agencies, 225 tribal gaming commissions, 475 jurisdictions around the world, and they provide over 120,000 equipment certifications a year. With Mr. Maida and also representing GLI is Ali Galavani. Mr. Galavani has over 30 years in the industry, extensive regulatory and technical and operational knowledge, and previous to working for GLI, he started his career in 1984 with the state New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement as an engineer, and rose to the position of Deputy Chief of the Technical Services Bureau, and he joined GLI in 2008. And along with Ali, several members of GLI staff that have been supportive over the last year, Kevin Mullally and Patrick Moore, I wanted to recognize them as well. And representing BMM Test Labs, all the way to the right, is Mr. Travis Foley, who is the Executive Vice President of Operations for BMM. Mr. Foley is responsible for day-to-day operations and service delivery in North America and South America. He spent 13 years in the Nevada Gaming Control Board's Technology Division, where he was the director of the lab. And BMM has 14 offices in 13 countries, serving 270 jurisdictions in North America and 346 jurisdictions internationally. So to frame this, 2 weeks ago we talked about the process of requesting applications from independent testing laboratories to be certified by the Commission. We're pleased to have GLI and BMM be our two applicants, which are before you today. I have reviewed the material which we requested based on the requirements that I shared with you 2 weeks ago. I deem it to be substantially complete. It has not, however, been investigated by the IAB. The state police will do a Massachusetts vendor background check, but based on the experience of these two laboratories and our need to engage with them in order to support the opening of Plain Ridge, I'm requesting that you consider a conditional certification as independent testing laboratories to work for the Commission. And that's the motion that I would make, but I would like to give our guests the opportunity to speak and you to ask me or them any questions about the process that we've gone through so far.
I won't reintroduce myself. Good to see all of you today. I am from New Jersey. Our world headquarters is in Lakewood, New Jersey. We've been supporting your effort and your CIO's effort out of our New Jersey office, where we house about 300 employees. Interesting, in that office, we start at 7 a.m. in the morning and we complete our work at 3 a.m. in the morning, running double shifts, so that we know that in the gaming industry, most things that aren't so good happen after 7 o'clock at night in terms of the most of the play. So we have people available. Also our inspection unit, people who come out and inspect machines and work with governments to help them inspect machines, are located there. Ali, as former chief engineer for the gaming enforcement, will be heading up our relationship with you. It's a 4-hour drive, depending on how fast you go. But he will be back and forth and working with your staff, along with Patrick Moore, Kevin Mullally, and our other resources. And so that's really all I have to say, and I'm happy to take any questions about either our background or background of a company or my background myself.
Well, I had several of us have had an opportunity to visit your lab in Las Vegas, as well as the BMM lab, and I was impressed with what goes on there. But you just said something that I didn't realize. Do you do real-time problem solving? Is that part of the service you provide?
So we have a forensic division, so that, a lot of times machines might fail, or you might have a patron dispute.
Right.
Most of patrons are playing, frankly, after 5 o'clock at night,
Right.
it's mostly the evening weekend.
Right.
So we're on call 24 hours a day, but we're actually testing machines from 7 a.m. to 3 a.m., 4 days a week. So we open up in Australia 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday, and we really work all the way through 24 hours a day until 8 o'clock Las Vegas time on Friday. And then we have a 24-hour call. So if you do have a forensic problem, a dispute of a winner or whatnot, we can mobilize people and be here in 3 hours from New Jersey. And we're trained. I'm a lawyer and I practice in 5 states, but we also have people who've been trained in evidence and retention of evidence Essentially, if you think of when a plane goes down and there's a black box,
Right.
well, every slot machine has a black box, and you can read it back, just like the National Transportation Safety Board
Right.
does.
Right.
And so we could take that device, working with your state police, with your lab, with your CIO, read it back, and really come to conclusions as to what really did or did not happen.
Got it, thanks.
I just have one comment, and that is, I used to make that drive on a regular basis and never did it in 4 hours. So I just want to caution you that that may be difficult.
I started from further north than
Oh,
I think you did.
not from Lakewood, not from Ocean County.
That's
Okay.
right, that's right.
Okay.
She was a state trooper, so
I know.
she couldn't do it in 4 hours.
She was one of our state troopers.
Just a quick question. Have you worked out an arrangement with Director Wells with this plan? Is that something that's been discussed with IEB?
It has.
Okay.
Travis, would you like to say
Let me just,
something on behalf of
before you,
BM?
before you
Oh, I'm
move
sorry.
on, has GLI ever been denied a license in a U.S. jurisdiction?
Never,
Have you ever had any difficulties getting licensed, any questions raised, complaints filed?
never.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Travis Foley, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Director Day. I'm glad to be here today. I'm excited about the opportunity of working with the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. You know, Mr. Glennon said some very positive comments about so far the experience in working with us. I would just like to kind of echo that back at him. I would like to say that I've been involved in the gaming industry on the regulatory side for many, many years. Most of it was in Nevada, where I worked with other commercial jurisdictions in my time at BMM, with many tribal jurisdictions as well. And Mr. Glennon's approach to an openness to understand how different regulatory frameworks have been established and how they operate, and to look at those very closely and select the best practices from those to establish those here has been refreshing to see someone do that. So just wanted to make that comment. Only other comment I have, and I'll answer any questions you may have, is I did want to pass along apologies from our owner and president, Mr. Martin Storm. Mr. Storm lives in Australia and was somewhat short notice and was unable to make it here in time for the meeting, so I wanted to pass that along to you. So, available to answer any questions you may have about BMM.
Anybody else?
No, I have none. I can understand him not coming from Australia.
That takes more than 4 hours.
That takes more than 4 hours. Right, right.
Oh, he would make it if he could. He was recently flew. He was in airports or on a plane for over almost 30 hours to make it to Mississippi recently. So he would have done it if he could, but he was unable to.
Right, well, we understand that. But as I said, we had an opportunity to visit many of us did, your lab as well in Las Vegas, and that too is a fascinating place, so it's nice to see you.
Yeah, I'll mention that because I have that. I had that opportunity as well of both labs, and it's really an impressive. They're both an impressive operation, and it's clearly that the activity that they have and the service that they provide all around is really remarkable. So.
Anybody else? Same question. Has BMM ever been denied a license in a U.S. jurisdiction?
We have not.
And any questions raised, any challenges, any problems with license
No.
applications or licenses?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Right, I guess we're ready for a motion?
Yeah, so I think the last paragraph kind of tees up what I'm looking for you to.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the commission approve temporary independent testing laboratory certifications for BMM and GLI, with full certification to be issued contingent on the outcome of a IEB background investigation.
We change temporary to conditional? You may have a previous version. I think we did some wordsmithing.
Okay.
Conditional independent testing
Yes.
certification.
Conditional independent testing laboratory certification.
Second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to working with you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you for responding so quickly.
Quickly, yeah.
Drive safely home.
Anybody want to, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break while the wind folks come up. We'll be back in 5 or 10 minutes. We We are ready to reconvene meeting 147. Ombudsman Ziemba is next on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we're here to hear an update from the WIN team on its supplemental final environmental impact report filing and the design of the WIN Everett facility. As you recall, WIN presented revised renderings of the facility at the January 22nd meeting of the Commission. WIN presented an update of its preparation for the SFEIR filing at the Commission meeting on the 5th of February. Since that date, WIN submitted its SFEIR filing on February 17th. I'm going to let WIN go through some of the timing regarding the SFEIR process. I know that's part of their presentation. WIN will also provide a brief update regarding some of its community consultations and conversations, which was another condition of the WIN license. Before the presentation, I will note that the Commission posted important sections of the SFEIR filing on its website shortly after the WIN filing with MEPA. With that background, I'll ask Mr. Bob DeSalvio, President of WIN Mass LLC, Jackie Crum, Senior Vice President of WIN and General Counsel, and Chris Gordon, WIN Project Consultant for the Drago Group, to present their update.
Thank you, John, and good morning, Commissioners. Great to be back in front of you again. And we're very pleased today to really report very significant progress on the project. We have a lot of momentum moving forward, and in particular today, we want to highlight the areas of land assembly, the SFEIR filing, and certainly the community outreach meeting. We are going to break this presentation up really into two parts. Jackie wants to cover the items that were required through the licensure and an update on each one, so that the Commission is well informed that we are making our deadlines. And then Chris is going to talk more in depth about the SFEIR and design. And so with that, I'm going to turn it right over to Jackie.
Morning, Commissioners. Pleased to be in front of you. So the first and foremost, following the receipt of the license, is we made all of our upfront payments to our surrounding communities. This totaled $1.9 million. Everything has been paid to date. Second, just wanted to go through some of the license conditions that we've fulfilled. Obviously, we've made the payments to the Commission, both the assessment fee and the $85 million license fee. As the second item is we've issued the $122 million deposit bond. Then we acquired the land for the gaming establishment, which was the main parcel. In addition to the main parcel, we've also acquired the MBTA land, which allows our preferred access, and some additional land at north of the property, which permits the service road. We have submitted and you have approved our diversity plan. And we have also made a $1 million payment to you, which you're holding in escrow for the City of Boston. We have continued our outreach to the various surrounding communities, and in particular to the Charlestown neighborhood. Since we've received the license, we've held 4 meetings in the Charlestown neighborhood. One was a big public meeting where we covered a range of topics, and then we've had 3 subsequent meetings last week, the week before, last week, where we covered specific topics. We have another one scheduled for the 24th, and this is specifically designed to talk about Sullivan Square and Rutherford Avenue. We invite everyone who's interested to participate in that meeting. There's been a lot of insightful and thoughtful comments raised during these meetings, and we're going to continue to engage. We have also submitted our PIC application, the Public Improvement Commission application related to our Sullivan Square mitigation. And we anticipate...
When was that submitted?
It was before the 90-day deadline. I think it was in January, I believe. I have to look it up.
We can get you the specific.
Yeah. And we're going to continue, design has continued on that. We're working with the various stakeholders. We're receiving comments. We'll continue to refine the design, and hopefully that process will be completed in the fall.
Ms. Crum, just in general, the community meetings you've had in Charlestown, how how would you characterize the topics? Mostly around traffic, I would guess, or?
There's been a lot of interest in the remediation process, and we're going to continue to have updates on that. And once we finalize what our remediation plan is, we'll present that to the Charlestown neighborhood specifically. For instance, there's been concern about trucks going through residential areas, and we've been able to give people comfort that that's not what we intend to do, and commit to that. The other big issue, of course, has been Sullivan Square and Rutherford Avenue, which we got into a discussion last Wednesday on, and we'll pick that discussion up in more detail on the 24th.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. As you are aware, of course, we submitted, we looked at the design of the tower, and those renderings were submitted on January 22nd, and Chris will talk in more detail about what that entails. Finally, working with the commission, we were able to send out, or the commission sent out on our behalf, letters to all of the Suffolk Down employees. We've received 60 responses.
60?
60, with a lot of interest, particularly in construction jobs. So we'll be following up with them in the coming weeks and hopefully hold a forum that will enable them to participate in that.
That probably means getting into a union somewhere.
It does.
So
Yeah.
anything you can do to facilitate their understanding about what's required.
And we're working very closely with the unions. We're putting together a big sort of union fair so that people can come and go through and meet with the various unions, see what their requirements are with the various trades, and figure out what they need to do pretty short order to get to be part of the construction process.
Great.
Jackie, do you have an update as to where you are in the process of either selecting construction managers or GC? I mean,
Sure.
this all ties into that.
Sure. So we had 4 very good, productive meetings with construction managers, with potential construction managers. And we are stepping up that process and hope to have somebody on board by May, June.
Thank you.
Any further questions before we turn it over to Chris for the SFEIR?
Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for having us back. We want to talk briefly about the SFEIR and some of the design issues you've asked about. As you know, we'd filed late last year our FEIR, the Final Environmental Impact Report, and most of that was deemed adequate and acceptable. However, they asked us to do a supplemental environmental impact report, primarily based on transportation. So through the last probably 4 or 5 months, we've been working with a number of different groups, including the MDOT, the Boston Transportation Department, DCR, a number of the communities, and really going deeper into some of the transportation issues. And we would say in hindsight, we think it's been a positive phase. It's allowed us to really spend time that you might do later in design sometimes, but because of the importance of this project, we really get into a lot more detail, which is a good thing. So we filed the SFEIR on February 17th. It's approximately a 2,000-page document. About a third of that is text and graphics, and the other 2/3 is technical appendix, which is mostly traffic analysis and model results and that sort of stuff. And we're pleased to say we think we've addressed all the issues. There were approximately 59 issues that were brought up to be addressed in the SFEIR. Some were big, some were little, but all were important. So we've done an awful lot of work on that and addressed those. It's now out for comment. We expect comments back. The comment letters are due March 27th. And then we expect a certificate on the SFEIR April 3rd. And those dates are sort of set by the process that's set up by MEPA. We've also met with MEPA. We've met with a number of people. We've met with the butters that are going to be writing comment letters. We spent a lot of time with the city of Everett, and obviously we've had meetings in Charlestown. So I think we're guardedly optimistic on how that's going to go. But we certainly look forward to reading any of the comment letters that come in. Any questions on that before we go on to some of the design issues?
Just remind me, the comment letters come in at the, you have access to the comment letters until the 27th, or can you get access
They
to
can be
them?
submitted to MEPA until the 27th, and then MEPA evaluates those comment letters as it writes the certificate.
Okay.
And the certificate, the dates are set up by the way the MEPA regulations run, so the certificate would be out on April 3rd. Now, there's still...
I'm glad that you're optimistic about this, because of course this is the key to doing anything, and everybody understands that. And so I know you've been doing a substantial amount of work on this, and I've looked at the SFEIR, at least, I didn't read every word of it, but But
All 2,000 pages?
It represents a thorough analysis of the issues, but it's just to restate the obvious that you've got to get that done before any shovels go in the ground for any phase of this.
And we're going to show you a slide in a minute. Through that process, we were able to actually modify some of the transportation improvements that we think for the better. So we're going to show you that. We're also able to slightly reduce traffic. That's primarily due because of the program adjustments we made in result of some of the things that came out of the FEIR. So for most categories, traffic went down, and we're going to show you some of the impacts of that in just a second. This is the rendering that you've seen, but we just want to walk you through this, and obviously for the people that are here as well. The big change here is the architecture of the tower. Thanks to the commission, there was some good thought put into the process of what that tower might look like. And this is the new tower. It is similar to what has been built in Las Vegas. It is a glass facade. It's curved. It's convex toward the view to the city. It is the same height as the old tower. It's a bit wider, and that allowed us to go to the higher number of rooms. We're now up to 629 rooms, and so we've added 125 rooms. But the height stayed the same, which meets all the zoning and the height restrictions for the FAA. It sits on the podium in just about the same location, so the internal workings as far as vertical circulation, lobbies, that sort of stuff are the same. But we think it's quite an elegant solution for the site, and I know you've seen it, but we think it's going to be quite a nice addition to the skyline. The rest of the building is quite similar to what you've seen. It's still a low-rise podium, which is primarily retail, food and beverage, and gaming. Stone facade with some of the copper roofs you see on the rendering. And the outside, and I'll show you a site plan in a minute, but the outside is also what you've seen before, which is a very detailed ornamental landscaping around the entire building as well as the waterfront. We still have the living shoreline, which is on the edge of the water along the front of the site. There's what's known as a living shoreline, which is a restoration of some of the native plantings that would have been there a long time ago, taking out some of the, obviously, the debris and the structures and the stuff that's there now. And that allows not only a much more scenic view, but it also allows the water to come and go through the tides, and it actually gets some cleaning through the natural shoreline that's there. And then, of course, in by the boat shuttle, we repair and replace the bulkhead that's there for the boat docking. This is hard to read, but I think you've got it in your book. This is an update of where we are with the program from the FEIR to the SFEIR. Through comment letters and through our own analysis of the market, we made some adjustments. They're minor, but they are important. As I mentioned, the hotel room count has gone up by 125 rooms. It's up to 629. We think that's really a good number. The market seemed to be driving a higher number, so we put more hotel rooms in. We've also, dropping down to the bottom of the page, have reduced the parking a bit. We got some comment letters back that said, gee, the more parking you build, the more people will drive. So we took a very close look at the entire program. We took a very close look at parking, and we took 300 parking spaces out of the garage. We still think we have enough. We don't see any problems with overflow, but it did allow us to show less parking in the garage, and yet still plenty. There's 3,400 spaces under the building, which, according to the analysis in the SFEIR, is more than enough for what we need. There's a lot of other changes on here you'll see, but they're mostly minor. There's one of the bigger ones that's a negative is we did take out the nightclub, as I think you know, and that allowed us to reduce our traffic, because that was a big traffic generator. That was mainly due to market analysis that said it might not be what we want to use that space for, and that allowed us to increase some of the meeting and conference space. We've made some minor adjustments to retail, to food and beverage, back of house, front of house, but generally the rest of it is a result of those changes. There's also some fine tuning just because we're much further into the design. Our design team is going 100 miles an hour, so we've actually got real detailed drawings now to do some of the square footage takeoffs, and that's why you see some of the takeoffs are slightly different than they were before.
Yes, well, as I looked at that, it is basically a new skin on and slightly larger skin on the previously existing proposal,
Right.
coupled with a removal of the nightclub. And insertion of convention space in there, which, as you suggested, decreases the traffic. Those struck me as the two big changes, and the
That's
rest
correct.
was a sort of a reorganization of existing elements.
And it also allowed the environmental impacts to stay about the same or less. So we were able to not have to redo all those sections because it was the same thing. Sorry. I'll briefly show you and again, we can stop on any of these you want, but this is the floor plan layout. It's color-coded. The purple color here is the gaming. Around that, the tower sits right here where the hotel is, right above the main lobby, so you have direct connection to the front and to the gaming area. You then see in red, that's food and beverage, so there's a number of nice restaurants, as well as a buffet, a coffee shop, that sort of stuff. That's all the food and beverage. The more pink color is retail. There's a lot of retail wrapped around the front, and then out here on the peninsula, we have meeting space, and that can be everything from meetings to weddings to functions in the ballroom, and it's quite a nice open space where we can have a number of events there. Everything else in gray is back of house. As you well know with these facilities, there's a lot of back of house required, so we've been very careful on a tight site how to lay that out, and we're very happy to say that everything fits, everything works. And the design team, as I mentioned, is far into details now, so we've tested out a lot of these concepts and they work. So we're very pleased how the design process is going. On the site, it's very similar to what you've seen. There's a very large area out in front looking out over the city, which can be used for functions. We've actually added what's called an events lawn there. It's big enough so you could have an outdoor, small concert, you could have a wedding, you could have a meeting, and it's actually set up to be used as an outdoor function space in the good weather. The edge of the site still has and will have the detailed boardwalk that goes around the entire site. So it's a 20-foot wide boardwalk that allows you to walk the entire property. That's open to the public. It's a public amenity. Anybody can go out there and walk their dog, take a jog, whatever they want to do. It connects into the DCR park up here. It connects out to Broadway here. So you can traverse the site anytime you want, and it'll certainly be public access for people who want to be on the property. In a minute, I'll show you a detailed access plan, how you come and go, but that's sort of the general overview of that floor.
But that's the biggest change from this one, is the access point.
Yeah.
That
We're now able to use, as
First time I've
Jackie
seen
said,
this,
it's no longer our preferred access, it's the access, which is good.
That also, at the risk of repeating, that also illustrates that this, apart from the change in the function, is essentially the elements of the building that we saw before. That's why I mentioned a minute ago
Right.
the
The
new
prog-
skin.
Program is very similar.
Right.
With the exception that we talked about with the nightclub and the hotel rooms.
Right.
This just shows you how the hotel tower fits. You mentioned a new skin on the old tower. That is correct. It is, however, a bit wider. We've widened it on each end, which allowed some room for some of the suites and other things. It's also much more of a smoother curve. It's not the three-legged diagram. It's actually a curve here that looks out over the city. And as you saw the day you were out there, some of you were able to go up in the lift, you do get a dramatic view of the city skyline. So people think it's in Everett, you can't see Boston. The opposite is true. It's a fantastic view out of the hotel. This is an example. There's 4 levels of parking under the building, 3,400 spaces. This is one floor plan of the garage. Just to demonstrate where it is, it's all of the building with the exception of the meeting area and the back of house. And the back of house has some space underneath it. There's some height issues there we won't go into, but the garage actually extends into part of that. So the most of the garage is right here underneath the main part of the building. There's a couple elevations I'll go through here. We can go into detail if you want, but these are just the beginning of the architectural drawings we're doing to actually lay out each facade of the building. As we mentioned, the facade here, of course, is the glass with the distinguished, the Wynn logo here on the top, as you'll see in Las Vegas, the swooping roof. The facade at the green space level is primarily stone. So you'll see more of a natural stone on the facade, and then there's a number of details which are starting to come out through the design process of how that's all going to be detailed. This shows how the back of house, the retail area, and the tower line up. And this is it from the north, looking down on it from the north. The access was mentioned, and I want to make sure we're clear on this. We have closed and own the MBTA property now, which provides 3 parcels of land. The main entrance, part of the service road here, and I'll show you on a different slide another piece over here, but that's now done. So we have access to put in our main entrance, our preferred entrance, if you will. So we're quite excited about that. We also continue to have the emergency access over the tracks that we work with the fire department on, and Chief Butler's been great on working with us on the second access there. So we'll have the main entrance, we'll have the service road entrance, and if necessary, we'll have the emergency entrance over the tracks, as well as the pedestrian entrance from DCR and the pedestrian entrance off Broadway. So we're very pleased at all the access we have. And of course, we'll also have water access with the docks here, where people will come and go by boat. So we think we've resolved the access issues.
Say again the issue about emergency access?
Yeah, there's an existing emergency access here. The shopping mall over here uses in the event they need, if their main entrance is somehow blocked, they have a locked access across the tracks that the fire department uses. We have the same access going the other direction, same gate, same everything. So right here, if, for example, which would be quite unusual, if the main entrance was blocked, the service entrance was blocked, we have yet a third way to get onto the site with emergency vehicles, which is through a locked gate across the tracks that the fire department has access to.
That's up on a berm, isn't it?
No, you can,
Is
you can
it
drive
grade?
right across.
Oh, it is a grade?
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a berm, you're correct, there's a berm down here, but where the emergency access is, you've got a straight shot.
Okay.
And we've checked all the turning radiuses, and the largest fire truck they have can make the turn, so we're comfortable. And again, we don't think it'll be used, but
Right.
it's good to have.
There's been some commentary about the MIPA process attending the land transfer. What, if anything, can you tell us about that?
Well, as we said, the transfer is done, and there has been some discussion about sequence of events and timing on that, but as far as we know, we're still moving toward a certificate on the 3rd.
No, about this, a separate MIPA process for that transfer. Did that play any role in the discussion?
This has always been included in our MIPA filing, this access. So when we discussed it with the MBTA, they did not feel a separate MIPA filing would be necessary.
It's in the SFEIR. It was in the FEIR.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
Chris,
Yep.
just go back a little bit
Yep.
to the service entrance. There's space to turn around on service trucks or emergency vehicles.
Yeah, and I'll show you a slide of the whole service road in a minute, but if a service vehicle comes in, these are where the loading docks are. So almost all of the vehicles will come and go from here for linens, garbage, food, supplies, would all come and go out of here. And there is enough room in this service yard to turn a truck around. There's also a service road and a fire lane that goes all the way along the building out to the end, and we've added a turnaround. So you can see there's actually a loop there now where a full-size fire truck or a full-size delivery truck can turn around there. And there's a little, at this scale it's hard to see, but there's a loading dock right here. Because of the large meeting rooms, there could be an event being set up, a caterer or a band or you know, an event like that. So we've got a little loading dock here where a truck can come up and back up to that loading dock and unload for the meeting rooms. There's also a full-size elevator here where you can actually put an entire vehicle in that elevator for if you have an event on the gaming floor or something like that and you want to bring in a demonstration vehicle or large piece of equipment or a sculpture, you can do that. So they can turn around here and they can turn around here, so there's no dead ends for any deliveries. And we've been meeting with the fire department on this, and we've got another meeting set up on the 31st, and they're really starting to engage in all the issues about where they want certain things for hydrants and access, and there's a fire control room. So they actually went out to Las Vegas and looked at how the wind operates out there. So the fire chief, police chief have been out there and looked at the facilities. So we're starting to zoom in on what they need, and it's been going fine. This is the rest of the service road. The other MBTA property is here and here. This is the warehouse site, and we've also closed on that property, as Jackie mentioned, so we have the ability to put in the service road. And if you remember you may not remember, but in the transaction with MBTA, we have to get their new entrance open and operable before we can close their old entrance. So that's one of the early items which we're moving along on. So in order to get access here, we'll give them access here, then we'll close this entrance and be able to put in our entrance there. So there's a sequence. We can get to the site without their access, but it makes it easier. So that's a sequence of events we're working on now.
Chris, I noticed the employee bus turnaround. Just remind me, the employee bus coming in the main entrance or this back
Service road.
entrance?
We have a very aggressive, all the employees are parking off-site. As you know, they're going to be at places like Wellington Station, that sort of thing. And so we're going to be busing them all in. And so we've got a service drop-off area here. And actually inside the building, you can't see, there's a whole area where they can, there's lockers and there's uniforms. There's capabilities for them just inside that area. So all those service buses would come in the service road, drop off, loop around, and go back out again. This just shows how the MBTA new entrance would work. What we like about this is the MBTA now does not have a signal out on Broadway, and if you've been there at shift changes, there's a lot of cars coming and going against the traffic because there's no light. With this model, they actually do have a signal. They will have a signal there now, so they can get through the traffic. And finally, we want to give you an update on where we are on the transportation improvements. The scope of the transportation improvements is the same, but we've been able to fine-tune these a lot based on the period of time to prepare the SFEIR. There's a long list of things in the SFEIR, but these are the big ones, so we want to make sure we remind you what the big ones are. Obviously, in Sullivan Square, we're proposing about $10 million worth of improvements to Sullivan Square. This is primarily lane widenings, restripings, signalization, improvements to the bus station, so a number of things, and that has evolved very well, primarily because of meetings with the Boston Transportation Department and the DOT, as well as the MBTA, and the MBTA controls the bus station. So Sullivan Square is a complicated area, so we spent a lot of time understanding what's there and what we could do to improve it, and we're pleased with what we've got as the interim improvements there. Moving up toward the site, as you know, we're rebuilding Lower Broadway. This is a major effort because right now there's no turning lanes on Broadway. So even though the road feels wide, it's 2 lanes in each direction, you see traffic backups because there's no turning lanes. So one car that stops to turn can stop an entire lane. So we're doing a lot of things on Broadway, but the biggest thing we're doing is adding left-hand and right-hand turning lanes at most of the major intersections. So a car can pull off and dwell and wait for its turn as opposed to stopping all the traffic. So that's going to be a big fix on Broadway.
Is that in both directions? Chris?
Yes.
Does that work on
Yep.
both?
Yeah, and we're going to be signalizing timing the signals better. So Broadway very quickly gets much better, which would be good. And we want to get that done early enough so it'll also help with some of as the building starts to open, like a year in advance, we want to get this stuff done so it'll help as they start to have a lot of traffic coming to the building for ramp up and start up, that sort of stuff. Moving north, Sweetser Circle, as you know, we're going to be rebuilding Sweetser Circle. That's an area that's on the Revere Beach Parkway. Both Sweetser and Santilli and Wellington are all circles, if you will, that are along that area that have to be redone. Sweetser's gone through a lot of discussion, including as recently as yesterday, we had a meeting with the Bike to the Sea advocates that are advocating for bicycle access through Sweetser. It was a good meeting. They had good suggestions. The DOT hosted the meeting, so we're working on fine-tuning things like bicycle and pedestrian access as well as vehicles. Santilli has evolved. If you remember, at one point we had a flyover going over Santilli. We got a little bit of pushback on that. That people were a little curious about what it was, why we needed it, and DCR was not excited about having another flyover to maintain because these are actually bridges. So long-term, there's a lot of maintenance costs. So we've got a new design there that's all at grade. So it's a significant rebuild of Santilli, but it's all at grade. So we don't have to have the flyover anymore, and it still works very well. So we're pleased at that outcome for Santilli. And then Wellington, the plan is very similar to what it was before. It's really widening lanes and doing that sort of stuff in Wellington, as well as funding a long-term study if they want to look at other options for Wellington. So there's a lot of little improvements we didn't put on the slide, but there's a number of things we're doing in addition to these big improvements.
Go ahead.
Roughly, the numbers that I understood prior was about 2/3 of traffic coming through the south.
It's a little less than that, but it's in the 50, I'm going to have to look it up, but it's in like the high 58, 59% coming in through Sullivan Square.
Okay.
And then you've got about 20% coming in through Wellington, and then you've got the rest coming from various other places. So you've got close to 80% of the traffic between coming in Route 16 and coming up through Sullivan Square, and then the other 20% is coming from various smaller directions.
We got a letter from, do you remember the name of that group? I sent a letter around, it's Community Path, is that what it's called?
I don't know. I'm not familiar.
Headquartered in Somerville, I think it's called Community Path. Does anybody remember that, the name of it?
I don't remember the formal name, but
Yeah.
they were talking about extending the path along the shoreline.
Right. They're committed to getting a walkway all around the Mystic River and had a couple of suggestions, one of which was probably over the top, but we'll make sure you get it. And if they haven't been in touch with you already.
One related issue to that is part of the SFEIR, we've added in an additional mitigation feature, which is $250,000 to study a pedestrian bridge, which would connect the riverfront paths on both sides of the river.
Okay, so that was one of their suggestions, so.
We put it in.
Oh, that's great.
If you look at our site here, and you look at what's happening at Assembly Row, and you look at a lot of the stuff over here at Gateway, I mean, everybody who stands on any of these sites said someday there'll be a pedestrian bridge. So we decided to put some money behind that idea. So in the SFAR, there's a commitment to fund the next phase of study. DCR did the first phase of study. We're saying we'll fund the next phase of study, and we're not. Someday we don't know how and when it'll work, but someday we could envision a bridge across there.
Pedestrian only, or pedestrian and bike?
Well, our assumption is to be pedestrian and bike, because from the new T station, which is right here, you can get to either Gateway or our site in just a few minutes, which would allow us to have less shuttle buses, for example, and it would be a more pleasant way to get there. So we're, we don't know how, it's complicated because it's a river, but we think it's something that in the future could happen.
Yeah.
That was our summary, but we're happy to go back and answer any questions on any of those issues.
Chris, just real quickly, one of the local entities that was interested in the changes at Santilli Circle was the BNY Mellon facility business. I don't know if you've had any chance to reach out to them and talk about with the
a week ago
elimination
Monday.
of the flyover.
Yeah, a week ago Monday, the city of Everett hosted a meeting with them, and we met with them in detail with our traffic consultants and walked them through all these issues. And I don't want to speak for them, but the meeting went well. So I know they've seen this. They were concerned about the bridge right next to Santilli is going to be rebuilt anyway as part of a DCR and DOT improvement. And they were worried that if you had the bridge under construction, you had the flyover construction, you had Santilli Suites, it would be sort of a big construction project. So again, the meeting went well, and we'll wait and see what their comment letter is, but I think it was a good dialogue. We did a similar meeting with the Gateway staff. The Gateway team has similar questions about, they've said openly they're in favor of our project, but they're concerned about what it's going to impact them because they have a busy, especially on a Saturday, the mall has enormous amount of traffic. We had a very good meeting with them, I think it was middle of last week, and we're going to get them some more information this week, and I think again, the meeting we think went well.
Chris, you mentioned 59 areas and that you feel like you've addressed. And I know you did have a number of meetings with DOT, is that correct?
Correct.
And all of those issues, you felt like you had a clear understanding of what their intention was, what they were looking for?
Yeah, we took this, to break it down for you, what we did is we took the certificate and we literally divided it into these 59 issues, because the way the certificate is written, of course, there's a lot of very helpful text, but we boiled that into a very specific action item list, and we went with them over months and months. We had detailed meetings, and each meeting we'd take 4 or 5 of those issues. And there was some iteration, because our first answer was not their first answer, so oftentimes we'd have to work through it and look at more modeling and look at more definition. And again, I don't want to speak for them, but it was more than constructive. I mean, they had their team fully engaged, we had our team fully engaged, and our traffic consultants were deeply into the weeds on a lot of the different traffic modeling. I would say that we've certainly, on almost all those items, we've reached a conclusion. There were a couple that we still had a couple questions on, but I think we've agreed what the solution is in the SFEIR. So I think they would say, and again, I don't want to speak for them, I think they would say that we've thoroughly answered all the 59 issues.
Okay, thank you.
Is there some reason why you highlighted Dempsey's muffins and bagels on the transportation plan?
Dempsey's Bagels
It's
and
on the
Muffins.
last page.
Is it?
It's on the map.
The answer, of course, is no.
Thought that was maybe
Somebody who pulled that up must have had that on their Google search. Good free advertising.
Yes. Always happy to promote businesses
Yeah,
in Everett.
local
That's
businesses,
right.
good. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
This is a very helpful précis of where you are and what you've done and what the changes are and the like. But we, under our regulations, this being a conditional license, once the MIPA certificate has issued, are required to take another look at the entire program. And it seems to me that the approach we ought to think about now is getting the MIPA certificate. Obviously that's the next objective. And then teeing up through our ombudsman and our own project consultant, the materials that we need to look at in addition to the certificate.
Sure.
To make this judgment that our regulations require us to make. We went through, of course, at the time of the initial award, an exhaustive, I think it's fair to say, at least it was exhausting, process of analyzing both projects that were in contention at that point. And while I don't think we need to do that again or anything quite as extensive, because the certificate or the certificate requiring the filing of the FEIR focused primarily on traffic. We do need to take a look at that, and we do need to take an original look, our own look, at the programmatic changes, the changes of the layout. So I think that probably is the best thing to do, subject to any thoughts that you might have, Mr. Ziema, and that is to reiterate, to wait for the certificate to be issued, to see what is there, take that into account, and then with our project consultant, come back for a formal review of this, and then make a decision as to where we go there.
And just in that, and we totally agree. In light, we've been engaging with your consultants, PMA, we had several good meetings with them on the schedule and on some of the other procedural issues that we're working on. And I know that Rick and others have been attending some of the meetings like in Charlestown and some of those, so there's no, in other words, we're not waiting until we get to a certain date. We're happy to engage them and have been engaging with them now.
Right. But as a formal, and that's good, and I know Rick Moore you were talking about, and the PMA representative is here as well, but I think we need to have a formal punctuation mark, if you will, that comes at the end of a review after the certificate. So I think that's essential for us to do. But as I say, this is a very helpful interim briefing on where you are and where you're headed.
I had a quick question, if I can just go back to the project refinement stage, or page. You have essentially taken away about a third of the retail space, but it also talks about that includes hotel and gaming areas. Can you help me understand that change? I mean, that has kind of a big impact on, may or may not have a big impact on jobs and things like that, but certainly is a decrease in the overall retail space, which can tend to be a draw for, your non-gaming visitors.
So do you want to, we can explain what happened in the sense that some of the, when the convention and meeting area got a little bit bigger, some of the retail space got a little bit smaller. We don't see it as a major change in the market draw, if you will. The hotel space obviously got bigger because we added more hotel rooms, so that square footage was there.
Right.
The food and beverage was adjusted. I'm trying to get this slide up here just for a second, but the...
Page 10.
Yep. Food and beverage went down a little bit. Again, that's a slightly smaller area of food and beverage, primarily because we moved some of the program around, including by taking out the nightclub and adding in the meeting space. Other areas you had specific questions on, Commissioner?
Okay. All right.
Does that
appreciate
cover
that
it?
explanation.
I mean, the big moves, as you can see, was the added space because of the hotel rooms and then taking out the nightclub. Those are sort of the big moves. The back of house is really refinements, that addition. Front of house is a refinement, and the rest of them are really sort of fine tuning.
The reference to includes hotel and gaming areas was really retail within the hotel and gaming areas.
Okay. So not really all that space being along the kind of arm off the hotel building.
Correct.
And to go along with that, employees should remain about the same because they're picking up employees in other areas. For example, the hotel will
The
require
hotel,
more,
right.
where there may be a few less in retail.
Exactly. We don't see a change in the number of employees based on, it may be different positions, obviously, but because of the increase in the hotel rooms, the employee count should remain the same.
We also, just as a sideline, as we've been meeting with construction managers and digging in a bit deeper, it actually looks like our construction numbers may be up a little bit for employees because of the way the workforce issues. So we haven't changed it in the forecast, but that's good news, we think, from an employment point of view.
Great.
Bob or team, have you remind me what the parking situation is going to be? Is it free parking? Will you be managing that? Have you decided?
Right, we are going to have a revenue management program for parking, so we wanted to make sure that we were careful about that.
Right.
So yes, the plan is to have, to actually do a charge. Now, of course, for some casino guests, we may turn around and pick that up for them.
Yes.
But in general, there will be some sort of a revenue management plan, and we're still working on the details.
Right.
What's a revenue management plan?
Well,
You mean a parking fee?
Yeah, parking fee, yes, absolutely.
All right.
You cut right
A
through
way
it.
to charge people for
Yes.
parking, potentially, yes.
But it's also the equipment to allow you to do it.
Yeah.
It's actually installing the infrastructure so you can,
Right.
and it's all technology, of course, but we would have that system in place so that Bob will have the flexibility of how the charging works.
Right. Okay.
Right.
It's like revenue enhancements.
Yes.
Well, it's also traffic,
It's traffic
management,
management.
right?
Yes, it
You know,
is.
you can
It
avoid the person who parks there for free and then takes your
And go
shuttle back
somewhere
into
else,
downtown.
that's correct. We really want the spaces to be used for the guests of the facility.
And to reduce additional traffic coming to the property for that purpose. Yeah.
Anybody else? Thank you. It's really
Great update.
good
Thank
stuff.
you.
Yeah, very
Thank
exciting.
you.
Okay, you're finished? That's it. It is about lunchtime. I think, what time is it? 12:30, basically. I think we planned on about an hour, 45 minutes. That's good. Yeah. We'll take a 45-minute lunch break and be back at 1:15.